Okay.
Call the meeting to order and welcome everyone to the City of Kalispell's March 4, 2024 council meeting. Can I have a roll call, please?
Counselor Dahlman,
Here.
Counselor Fisher,
Here.
Counselor Hunter,
Here.
Counselor Carlson,
Here.
Counselor Graham,
Here.
Counselor Dowd,
Here.
Mayor Johnson.
Yeah, Ben here. Okay, all accounted for. Can we please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance? Mr. Dowd, let's see if you can remember to start.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right, Mr. Dowd gets comfortable. We'll look to someone else for agenda approval this evening. Mr. Hunter?
Well, thank you, Your Honor. I move that we adopt the agenda as published.
Second.
Second, thank you, Ms. Carlson. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. We have 4 items on the consent agenda this evening. The first item are the council minutes from the February 20th and 26th meetings. The second item is award bid for 2024 milling and paving project. This item considers awarding LHC Inc. the 2024 milling and paving projects. The third item is award bid for 2024 asphalt material. This item considers approving LHC Inc. to supply asphalt for scheduled street maintenance and improvement projects in 2024. And the fourth item is accept Roundup for Safety Grant. This item accepts the grant in the amount of $4,632 for Kalispell Police Department SWAT attire. Is there any comment on any of the 4 items on the consent agenda? See none, look to council for a motion. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move the consent agenda as published.
Second.
Second, thank you, Mr. Fisher. All in favor of the motion signify by stating aye.
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 Opposed, like sign. Motion carries. Okay, we have a committee report this evening, probably from the very best board that the county has. This is a landfill report from Dave Prunty, Flathead County Public Works Director. Mr. Prunty, welcome.
Good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council. Again, my name is Dave Prunty. I'm the Public Works Director for Flathead County. Mr. Russell asked me to come tonight and give you guys just a kind of a quick overview of the planning that the Solid Waste District has been going on doing for our landfill and the years to come for our disposal capacity. So I have up on the projector here a map of our properties, and I'll use this. Hopefully this will work, and I won't go into anybody's eyes here. But we have our current operating landfill is right here. This is the area that has been in operation since 1971. That is where the old landfill started, and has progressed generally in a east to west fashion. We are now actually working right here. We have more capacity left up here. We have roughly 6 years of capacity. We have 1.8 million cubic yards remaining, and right now we're using about 300,000 cubic yards a year. So we have 6 years of capacity in the north area landfill. The south area landfill is this parcel right here. That land was purchased back in the 90s from the Warners, and early to about mid 2000s. It was one of the first projects I did for the district. We went through the licensing procedure with DEQ and licensed that area, so it is ready for disposal. We just have to dig the hole, put in the access road to it, put in the liner, and we'll be ready to go there. In this area, there's about 18 million cubic yards of airspace. I'm going to tell you roughly 30 years. When we look at our incoming tonnages, we have put on top of them a 2% growth factor every year. As you all know, in our community, we have large ups and downs when it comes to our flows and our people that are coming here. We've seen growth as high as 16%. That was before the 2007 recession, and then the recession hit and we dropped 33% in 2 years. So we do a lot of ups and downs, but in general, that 2% growth curve has been consistent. So that's what we're using for as our increasing tonnage for our capacity. So that South Area landfill again has about 18 million cubic yards right in there. There's 2 blue hatched areas here in our southwest corner and then in our northeast corner. The northeast corner are properties we've owned for a while now. We are including them in the current project with the southwest corner properties for a license, what's called a license expansion document. The goal will be to turn this area into landfill space. This area is not slated at this point in time to be a garbage disposal area. I anticipate, I've told our board this is a great area up here that if for some reason we don't want to have a landfill anymore, or down the road when we are out of capacity, a transfer station in this area right here would be a great location for whether it's long hauled to an outside landfill. Missoula would be the obvious option, or even a rail haul up to on trucks up to Whitefish and then on the rail and going somewhere on the rail with the garbage is a possibility. So this won't be landfill, but it will be included in the license expansion document we're working on right now. These 14 properties down here we are planning on turning those into disposal for the South Area landfill. So we'll be expanding the South Area landfill. How this is drawn out right now, when we add this area in, it takes the South Area landfill from that 18 million cubic yard capacity up to 53 million cubic yard capacity. Going through that 2% growth curve, that takes us all the way up to about 82 years of life for our landfill. 30 years is a standard planning horizon in a solid waste facility. So we're bordering on triple of that, which is, it's a wonderful thing. Whether we use it or not, technology changes. The community decides not to have a landfill anymore and build a transfer station, haul it out. Who knows? It's a long time to be thinking about this, but we will have the capacity ready to go. There's a 20-acre parcel right here that is not included. We do not own it. We have had discussions with that landowner, and they have told us, yeah, we're willing to sell it to you just right now. Not right now. And we said, that's great. When you're ready, let us know. We have actually saved money. We have money in a trust fund for property expansion, and we'd be ready to go on purchasing that and then going through the process again to include it in our long-range planning for disposal capacity. But if we get our hands on this 20 acres, probably takes us up to about the 90-year mark would be my guess for disposal capacity today. So the district's doing a good job of planning for the long-range disposal capacity of our citizens in Flathead County and within the district, 3 cities and the unincorporated areas of the county. That was what Doug asked me to cover with you tonight. I certainly am hopefully able to answer any questions you may have.
Dave, I got a couple questions real quick.
Yes, sir.
I know everything new is lined. How much of the original is unlined?
So Mr. Mayor, I'm gonna tell you, there's about 15 acres of the original, what we call the phase 1 landfill that is unlined. Since 2002 is when we started putting garbage on the line system, and we built about 15, maybe 20 acres of liner now that we have built. So everything going forward will be on liner. The good old days, call them if you wish, of digging the hole and throwing it in when this facility started. There weren't liners anywhere, certainly not in Montana. I don't think there were any liners that I'm aware of elsewhere in the solid waste business. They just hadn't shown up yet. They weren't thought of. So.
And then we do testing water
Yes.
testing
Yeah,
around
so
the,
we have a perimeter network of wells. We have one upgradient well, which 93 is up here. Groundwater flow generally is in the north to south direction. An upgradient well here, and then we have wells surrounding the facility all the way around here. And we have wells that are closer in this area to the current north area landfill. We are in groundwater monitoring semi-annually. We pull our samples in June and December. Takes about 45 days to get the results back, publish our reports and submit them to DEQ.
any other questions from council? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Aaron. Yeah, real quick, just a question about your methane capture. Could you speak to that and whether there's any plans to expand on that?
Yes, in fact, so our program for our landfill gas to energy program, we are in a partnership with Flathead Electric Co-op. Started that in about 2007. They have a Caterpillar 20-cylinder engine that turns a genset. They own the system. The district sold them all of the pipes, the wells, the flare that we had installed in right around 99 to 2001. Sold them that system for $1. We are in a partnership with them. We just renewed the agreement with them for another 20-year period. So they own it, they operate it. They have just recently, in the last year, installed a second engine. So we are now capable of producing 3.2 megawatts of power. Roughly powers 3,200 homes in the Flathead. The second engine, they're still going through acceptance testing and getting things all moving forward with it, but that happens with these systems, and it is a benefit, number one, for the removal of the gas and making power out of it. It's a wonderful thing. There's also a benefit from the district's perspective for the groundwater, because gas can partition through the groundwater, put contaminants into the groundwater. So the more gas you remove, the faster you remove it to get it out of there, the better it is from the compliance perspective for the landfill. So great program. A landfill of this size, when I got here, I would never thought this would have occurred, but Flathead Electric did a great job of getting some what are called CREBs. They were clean renewable energy bonds back in the 2005, 6, 7 era. It was interest-free federal money that got us to the point we're at. So it's been a very successful program. The co-op is tickled pink, and so is the district with our program to produce power out of our garbage.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. And do you have an estimate about how much methane you're capturing from the?
That would be a nebulous number of us that I would give you. I can tell you this, right now, they're pulling out about 800 standard cubic feet per minute going to the engine. So a whole heck of a lot. To say you're capturing all of it would be not correct. You can't get all of it. It's not possible. But they continue to install wells. We just went through a partnership program where the district put in about $1 million over a 3-year project to increase the well field for more vertical wells, more horizontal wells, more ability to capture the gas. We have a complete looped system around the current landfill. So if they need to isolate an area and shut it off to work on it, the loop system keeps the gas flowing around to the energy facility, and we get a keep burn. So it's a state-of-the-art system at this point in time. I'm not capable of giving you a percentage, but I can tell you that 800, 900 cubic feet per minute is a heck of a lot of gas to power those engines like we are.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
Anything else, council? All right. Thank you much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, council. Appreciate your time.
Okay, we're going to move on to public comment. Any individuals wishing to address the council on items that are not on the agenda this evening, asking now to step up, give us your name and your comment. Over here, ma'am. Right to Amy. Yep.
Tipton. My address is 123 Crabtree Lane, Kalispell. I'm here tonight representing North Shore Water Alliance. The mission of the North Shore Water Alliance is to advocate for the protection of water quality throughout the Flathead Valley with emphasis on the areas north of Flathead Lake. We aim to educate the public on current and long-term risks to both ground and surface water quality throughout the Flathead region, given the ongoing and rapid growth that the Flathead is and will be facing. First, I hope that Kalispell will actively investigate the source of contamination of PFAS in its wells, given the known serious health effects it poses. Research shows that there are 4 major sources for how PFAS gets into drinking water: fire training and fire response sites, industrial sites, landfills, and wastewater treatment plants and biosolids. In our comments this evening, I would like to share with you additional concerns we have for other high-capacity Kalispell City wells located north of the Lakeside County Water and Sewer District. Lakeside County Water Sewer District is currently applying for a groundwater discharge permit to add to the volume of waste they are currently permitted to accept. Lakeside is now proposing to take all septic tank waste in the county from some 30,000 homes. This is in addition to the permit they currently have for the spray application of the partially pre-treated sewage onto several hundred acres of alfalfa fields. Lakeside currently collects sewage year-round from Summers and south along Flathead Lake and both sides of Highway 93 through Lakeside and almost to Angel Point. They do not have a sewage treatment plant as Kalispell does, though they are talking about building a less sophisticated version of a sewage treatment plant in the near future, whose wastewater would be fed into their proposed groundwater discharge system and when needed also spray applied. Lakeside currently relies on aerated holding ponds for limited pre-treatment of the sewage before it is spray applied to alfalfa fields. The proposed groundwater discharge permit Lakeside is applying for is of major concern to us and should be to the city of Kalispell because you have 2 1,000 gallon per minute city wells whose drawdown areas include the Lakeside County Water and Sewer District facility and its treatment areas. Even DEQ has issued 2 letters of deficiency to Lakeside to date regarding Lakeside's application for groundwater injection and the need to show this proposed groundwater injection system will not cause harm to surface and groundwater in the area. It is essential to understand that the aquifer underlying the Lakeside property is very shallow, and the property sits 1 mile north of Flathead Lake and just west of Flathead River and just south of Ashley Creek and Mighty Slough. The Lakeside County Water and Sewer District is now proposing to take over some $21 million in county funding, which the county received from the federal ARPA funding to build a facility to treat all the septic tank waste from some 30,000 homes in Flathead County. The county has recently decided not to build this facility, in part due to a doubling in costs for building the facility they received after several years of being told it could be built for approximately $20 million. Lakeside is also committed to taking the waste from several large new subdivisions, with others also waiting approval that will require the addition of 4 new high-capacity wells in this same area. Summers Water District is having to drill 2 new 400-gallon-per-minute wells to service the newly proposed development, including Steamboat Landing subdivision, located in this same area of drawdown. North Shore Water Alliance, along with over 20 other objectors, have filed an objection to the Cooper Farms water rights permit for the 2 300-gallon-per-minute wells to service this 700-plus unit proposed subdivision that borders Lakeside County Water and Sewer District. We have hired a hydrologist to look at the effect of this draw of water will have on the water rights of the people who live here. An additional major concern to us, and we believe to the city of Kalispell, is that there is no mention in the DNRC's environmental assessment of Cooper Farms water rights application for high-capacity wells and potential impacts to these wells from their proximity to Lakeside County Water and Sewer District sewage and proposed septic waste treatment facility within the area affected by the drawdown of water from these new wells or the city's 2 existing 1,000-gallon-per-minute wells. Among other concerns, we want factual and scientific evidence that the contamination from Lakeside wastewater treatment facilities, both groundwater injection and spray application, won't be drawn down into our drinking water and that it won't end up in our surface waters and eventually Flathead Lake. We hope you will join us and others in raising these concerns with the Montana DNRC and the Montana DEQ. We are asking that all the government agencies, DNRC, DEQ, and the city of Kalispell look at this entire situation as a full and complete picture and take into consideration the potential for toxic contaminants, including PFAS, or high levels of nutrients found in sewage and septic tank waste, and insist on clear evidence that the city of Kalispell's existing high-capacity wells supplying city drinking water and other private wells throughout this area will not be harmed now or in the future by the proposed current activities and future expansions of the Lakeside County Water and Sewer District's facilities and treatment processes. Please, let's all work together proactively to make sure that the Flathead Valley's human waste is dealt with in a way that will not harm or degrade our valley's world-class water quality. It is time to ask hard questions with those agencies tasked with approving new wells and those agencies tasked with permitting disposal of sewage and septic waste. Now is the time to pause and invest in studies to show the best way forward to preserve the valley's priceless water quality. Thank you all for your time.
Thank you, ma'am.
I do have one handout that I'd like to pass around. Is that-
Yeah, go ahead and hand it over here, Mary.
So I just wanted to pass it. Good evening, Mary Flowers, Citizens for a Better Flathead, 135 South Main here in Kalispell. I want to speak to you on 3 different issues this evening, and I'll start off with, well, I'll just mention the handout going around is a copy of the description on a bag of Glacier Gold of what the contents are, and that's one of the things I want to speak to tonight as well. We are pleased to see that the city just this evening announced it will be holding public information sessions on the PFAS that has been found in the city wells on Thursday, March 7th from 3 to 7 p.m. We look forward to hearing more information about this and spreading the word ourselves. We have questions as to whether or not there will be any online opportunity for people. So if that could be clarified, that would be helpful. We came tonight to also recommend that for the next year, you make an update on this PFAS issue, a standing item on your city council agenda, so that the public can be kept well informed on the issue. We feel that this is a difficult situation for you and the whole community, and the more ability there is for the public to feel like they can turn on city council meeting and know that they can hear an update, it will probably save calls to staff, it will save, keep the public aware, and I just think it might be, given the concern in the community. I was at the Free the Seeds event this weekend up at the college where I don't know how many people went through, but it was a whole lot. But we got a lot of people stopping to ask about what we thought about what was going on with the wells in Kalispell. So I would just encourage you to consider that as one opportunity to provide that information on a regular basis. We also have some questions that we would just throw out, and these are just quick questions that we hope would be addressed at your open house. One of the questions is, does the equipment that has been operating in front of the FECC campus near Highway 93 have anything to do with the testing for this plume of PFAS maybe coming? Sorry I didn't get to ask anyone ahead of time, so I have no idea if it's legitimate or not. If you want to squash that right now, please do, but it's a question I have. Please explain how water is blended within the city pipe system to further dilute the PFAS that, in your press release, you noted that it would be diluted further by the time it reached individual taps. Does this blending place some homes in some areas at higher risk of having less blended water than others? Another question. Please explain how you plan to make finding the source of this contamination a priority, recognizing that you have limited funding and what funding you can apply for to get that done. We recognize that you feel like you can't take any wells offline right now, and that you're looking at drilling possibly some new wells. But I think for the public, it would be really nice to know how we're going to tie down as a community. And I realize this is a hard task for you guys with little funding to do this, but I think it's important to keep us all aware of what's possible in this regard. Moving from that, I want to speak to the issue of composting. As I think you know, the Flathead County had proposed to build a composting facility using septic waste just north of the Lakeside Sewer and Water Treatment District. They have now, it is our understanding, decided not to build that facility and not to build a composting facility. That is in part due to really high cost estimates that got at the 12th hour. They had originally understood that plant could be built for $20 million, and I think at the 12th hour they were told it was going to be something like $40 million. Lakeside Sewer and Water District, however, is actively seeking to take money from the county ARPA funds to build a facility to take the septic waste, which is what the prior speaker spoke to. But Lakeside, fortunately, has also said they will not build a composting facility. And so we applaud those decisions, and we raise it for you because we realize that within your capital improvement plans, you have a proposal to build for the city a composting facility. And we are concerned that given the rapidly growing volume of information talking about the concentration of PFAS, pharmaceuticals, microplastics, and other materials within sewage and septic waste, that a product that for decades has been assumed a safe product to apply is no longer necessarily a safe product to apply on home gardens. If you had the opportunity, and my printer didn't work, so you don't have written comments, but I'll email them to you. There was a documentary recently by Montana Public TV that documented in the compost image that I sent around that there were indeed high levels of chemicals and PFAS of concern. And so, since this company uses biosolids, which is human waste, to create this compost product, and we really think it's important that human waste be the term that is least used, corresponding the use of biosolids. The public at large does not know what biosolids are. And as this documentary showed very well, that people who were using this on their gardens were very concerned that they were not informed that biosolids were human waste. We would urge the city to carefully reevaluate its goal to build a city-owned and operated composting facility. At the very least, hold additional public workshops and hearings before moving forward with such an investment. On a side note, we are still looking and actively researching energy sources that can be used to turn waste, human waste, into an energy source. You may be aware that earlier this year, we brought a company from Washington in to meet with the commissioners and to look at this possibility. But unfortunately, the system that they had in the valley, we didn't generate enough waste for the size facility that they built. But we're looking at some smaller systems, and we'll be coming back with that shortly. Secondly, we would request that the contract on your agenda this evening with Glacier Gold be given additional legal review and amended as necessary to clarify that the city is aware that biosolids are human food, likely contains compounds such as PFAS pharmaceuticals based on a widespread reporting and studies of such occurrences, and whether or not the city has done any testing to assure the public that this biosolids or human waste is safe to be made available for reuse. We have PFAS here in our valley, and we need to be mindful about where it's coming from and where it's ending up. In my comments, I'll also include a link to another site that is a pretty comprehensive site with a lot of interesting information on PFAS that we would encourage you to look at. And finally, on a totally different topic, recycling, which is a much more friendly topic, we appreciate the efforts that you are going through with your solid waste master plan. One of the things that, and we recognize the high cost of curbside recycling, that's kind of the gold standard that everyone would like to have, but no one wants to pay for. These are difficult times for that. But I wanted to remind you, and some of you will remember, that a number of years ago, we partnered with Evergreen Disposal, now Waste Connections, to have bins placed at Glacier High School, Flathead High School, Kalispell Middle School, and one of the elementary schools. And in that partnership, the schools monitored, the teachers took on responsibilities for those bins. It's very much like the bins that you see at Albertsons. They provided a secure place for them. And we would ask you to consider in your solid waste plan, maybe working with Waste Connections again to reestablish those bins for your schools. It's a great way, we're in the schools right now teaching about recycling, and it's a great way for them to have a much more readily accessible source. Those bins were regularly full with school paper, school cardboard. Plastic is hard to do these days when you're doing it in a situation like that, but we could at least be removing significant material from the schools, so we consider that. And I'm not aware when that comes back on your agenda, but we look forward to discussing that further. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Ron Gerson, 9 4th Avenue East here in Kalispell. This is sort of an impromptu address and request to the council to consider. I was actually planning to be at the Columbia Falls City Council meeting this evening where they're discussing perhaps a look again at the CFAC EPA proposal, which is due to be presented towards the end of this month. This is Kalispell, it's not Sioux Falls. CFAC is up there. However, I think it would behoove the council to perhaps consider a letter, very much amazingly, as the commissioners did just a few days ago, in support of a stay of execution, as it were, for that particular proposal, in the light of the fact that really both the considerations of alternatives, dealing with the pollution, the contaminants there, as well as the public participation in that process are both lacking. And I think it just would be helpful to that process for the council to express its belief or its support for a stay on that proposal. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Any other comment? Anything online? Okay, with that, we're going to move into the first action item this evening. The first item is it's actual Resolution 6187, Declaration of Council Vacancy. It is applicable. This resolution considers council seats subject to the district court order for cause DV-23-1393 in wards 1 and 2 to be declared vacant. Mr. Russell?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, and appreciate your calling to attention to the potential and, if applicable, normally don't put agenda items that say, maybe we'll look at it, maybe we won't. This one's a timely one, though, so that's why we wanted to put, the tentative components on there. A couple of weeks ago, we received an order related to the November election and the concerns related to the wards and the operation and certification of those results. Based on failure for the county to update the ward systems as were passed by the city of Kalispell. Judge issued that those election results will be set aside for wards 1 and 2. The county sought clarification and how what that meant for the existing wards. We found out just today in a written up order late this afternoon that we received that declaring that those seats should be vacant. Based on the previous order. So with that, we're looking at basically two actions before council. The first one, Resolution 6187, to actually declare those seats vacant and then start the process, which would be the second agenda item to start the appointment process for wards 1 and 2 for those seats. So with that, happy to answer any questions council may have, but I think that's probably a good way to start that process.
Any questions for staff? Any public comment on Resolution 6187? Look to council for a motion. Who wants to kick the two members off the council?
I'll do it.
Oh, Mr. Graham, you can do it. It'd be awesome. You're heartless anyway, so.
Well, thank you, Your Honor. I move resolution number 6187, a resolution to declare Ward 1 and Ward 2 council vacancies.
Second.
Second, thank you, Mr. Fisher. Any discussion on the motion? I think the only comment I'll make is the court order clarifying this was pretty interesting reading.
Yes, it was.
It was. So, seeing no other discussion, have a roll call vote on the motion, please.
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. Motion carries. We're going to move on to the next item, which is appointment to city council vacated seats in wards 1 and 2. This item considers appointments to fill in the vacant seats in wards 1 and 2 until successors are elected and qualified. Mr. Russell, I understand that there is very little language in state law regarding this, so if you want to clarify that for us. what we can do.
According to state law, it basically identifies that when there is a vacancy, council has 30 days to appoint the replacements. But there is no methodology related to that. It is entirely council discretion. In respect to the 30 days, we did have that question emerge last week, depending on if you're looking at it from the time when we received clarification, which would be today, or when the first order was produced. We're still within that 30-day time frame in either one, obviously, with today being like a few minutes ago. But with that, like I say, there is no prescribed methodology for how they are appointed. It just is a majority of the council. We put it on the agenda tonight, so it is duly noticed, so council can take action tonight if they so desire, or start a process. So with that, happy to answer any questions council may have.
Questions for staff? Mr. Dowd?
What would your proposed process look like for this? I know you said that we can do basically anything we can. What's your recommendation?
Okay,
On the process?
well, so we are looking at a brief period in time because there will be a new election. Normally, this statute is written for the next municipal general election, which would be a year and a half away. But that's not how it's going to happen. It's more than likely going to be in the primary, is my guess. So we are looking at a brief period in time. So my recommendation in respect to the work in front of the council, which includes deep dives into some of our enterprise systems and the whole budget process, is to appoint someone familiar with the process as soon as possible. Hopefully that's answers your question.
Yeah, well, I was talking more, I was asking more around, do we take nominations and then deliberate on them and do it, or do we just do appointments tonight?
Again, that's part of the deliberative process of the legislative body. Normally, when you're not looking at such a condensed window, if you're looking at a year and a half, I think you have more time to consider and deliberate some of those things. Not that you couldn't do it during this period, but you stretch it out another 30 days, you may be 60 days away from the election. Normally, we go through an orientation process for any new council members that come on board, and that eats into it, and then bringing them up to speed on some of those different parameters. So I would recommend an entirely different process for the circumstances of this situation.
Aren't we also under a time limit to appoint? We have to do it within 30 days of vacancy, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I, for one, haven't visited with anybody, obviously. Think we have two highly qualified people who actually did win their election, who have a lot of experience with what Mr. Russell just mentioned, with some deep dives into issues. I would be willing to move forward tonight with two highly qualified, educated council people.
Do you want a point of order him or should I? Is there a question in there for the staff, Mr.?
Do you agree?
Touche.
Second that.
Any other questions? Any public comments on the appointment to city council vacated seats wards 1 and 2? See none. Up to council. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Your Honor. I'm just going to go ahead and put a motion out to appoint Sam Nunnally to Ward 2 and Ms. Carrie Gabriel to Ward 1 until the election happens.
Second.
Okay, motion second. Any discussion on the motion?
I guess I would say I agree with Jed is with what the workload we have coming up here with just especially the budget. I think it would be good to go and have experience on the council for that role. So I mean that's why I made that to continue that through until we can have that election redo.
Other discussion, Mr. Hunter?
I just appoint a process, not that I think the outcome's any different, but probably taking a vote on each of them separately would make sense.
That's what I would probably recommend as well would be,
I suppose, yeah.
so we have motion second. Do you want to amend your motion?
I'll amend it to where the first one is for Ms. Gabriel on Ward 1.
Second.
Friendly second?
Friendly second.
Okay, so now we have an amended motion appointing Ms. Gabriel to Ward 1. Any discussion on that?
I could make it dirtier and say she goes to Ward 2. But I'm not going to.
Okay, please don't. It's been ugly for the last 60 days anyway. Any other discussion on it? Have a roll call vote?
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson,
Oh. Okay. So now we're back to Ward 2. A motion to fill Ward 2. Mr. Dowd?
Your Honor, I move that we appoint Mr. Sam Nunnally as interim council member for Ward 2.
Second.
Second, motion second, discussion. I like the word interim. Seeing none, roll call vote.
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson,
Aye, motion carries. So now do we ask them to take the seats and read oaths of office again? Because we are officially swearing in to 2 new seats.
Yeah, I think they can come back and take the office. I did just do an oath of office as part of this term. I guess I would look to legal, if you have any guidance.
I don't know. I think that their oath is probably still standing at this point. If you want to, I think they can come up. I think they can be involved in discussion. If anybody is uncomfortable with them taking votes, we could do an oath at the next meeting. I think we can leave that somewhat to your discretion as well.
Okay.
We're in somewhat unprecedented times.
Right, I mean, it seems with the the vacated seats, that an oath would make sense. But just to dot the I.
have it on me, so pull it up on the computer probably.
I have the one from Animal House. Committed to memory.
And if we can, I guess I would, again, turn to legal, not to put John on the spot, but we do have it on the agenda as appointment 2, so I think that would fall under is taking an oath tonight.
Let's try to do it.
Okay,
I think it makes sense.
Okay.
Let's pull it up here.
and I do appreciate City Attorney announcing that this is unprecedented. So, normally we don't like trying to do these things on the fly, but
But we're going to.
yeah.
Ms. Gabriel, can I have you step forward, please? Just right up here, Mr. Nunnally, if you want to.
That's,
Yeah, same time, because that's what we did, if I remember right, with the last one. Have you face the city attorney and raise your right hand. and-
If everybody can give us just a moment to.
Oh,
Natalie, state code.
Haven't won yet.
We filled the space though, while we're waiting. I was curious if Councilmember Gabriel was going to come and sit on the dais during the discussion for Councilmember Nunley. I thought that would be an interesting bylaw.
well, we didn't want to see a 7-1 vote. I hate to say it, it just popped in my head as we're going, hey.
Should go snap a picture. This is an anomaly.
Yeah, this is the interesting thing.
Sid, you got it right there in your phone?
I'm gonna take a picture.
Oh,
I was sitting there going, of course, the libertarian would have it all right here.
This is the first time it's ever happened.
Yeah, if you're going over, get it over the
Here it's.
thinning spot.
Yeah.
They'll be your friends.
It's too funny.
Appreciate that. It's
I had to bring back an oldie but a goodie.
You didn't say 'em.
And I do appreciate the public's patience as we do this. Nothing like live TV, right?
Absolutely.
Order stuff.
I state your name. Fidelity and fraternity.
All right, raise your right hand. And repeat after me. I do solemnly swear. State your name. Probably didn't put that in the right place, but that I will support, protect, and defend
I will support, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States
the Constitution of the United States
and the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
I will discharge the duties of my office with fidelity, so help me God.
There you go.
There we go.
Oh, yay. Whoop, whoop.
It's probably the only time I've sworn in two people to council. I didn't have all their family in the room.
Oh, now they can come sit.
Well, thank you to the council for bearing with us during the pause in flow.
Apologize for springing it on you. But
No, it's a good question, an appropriate question.
Welcome back, you guys. We missed you.
Okay, we're going to move forward to the full council again. We have the third item on the agenda, which is Woodland Park Apartments annexation and zoning. This item considers annexing property at 520 Lenwood Lane and along the east property line of 51, 55, and 75 Woodland Park Drive with zoning of B1 neighborhood business. We'll hear our staff presentation on Resolution 6188, the annexation, and then we'll hear at the same time presentation on Ordinance 1918. This will be the first reading for the zoning. Take questions for staff on both items, and then public comment on both items, and then council will deliberate each in order. So with that, Mr. Russell?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, and I'll turn it over to PJ Sorensen, our senior planner, to provide the staff report.
All right, thank you, Mayor, Council. As you mentioned, TCC Investments LLC, Scoreboard Sports Bar LLC, and Mitch Termolen have applied for annexation initial zoning of B1, which is neighborhood business, for property located at 520 Lenwood Lane and along the east property line of 51, 55, and 75 Woodland Park Drive. The property totals approximately 17,400 square feet. Consists of an alley right-of-way that was running right through the western portion of the subject property that was recently abandoned by the county commissioners, and then a lot, which is most of the property on the east side there, that's used as parking and snow storage for the Scoreboard Bar. There's no plans have been submitted, but it is anticipated that the property would eventually be developed potentially as an apartment complex, could potentially also incorporate a rebuilt bar. But as I mentioned, there's no specific plans in for the development of the property at this time. And so therefore, this application review are limited to only the annexation initial zoning designation for the property. A review of any redevelopment to the site would occur when plans for such are submitted. Also, it should be noted that the property being annexed will be aggregated with the main Scoreboard property. This is a shot of the site. It's currently zoned County R5 with the existing Scoreboard property being inside the city limits in Zone B1. As I mentioned, the subject property would be aggregated with property to its west, which is already within the city limits. That property is Zone B1 with a growth policy designation of commercial on the Kalispell Growth Policy Future Land Use Map, which supports the B1 zoning. The map designates the subject property as urban residential. The zoning ordinance generally does not contemplate B1 as a zone within that land use designation. Under section 27.20.070 of the zoning ordinance, lots should not be split into two or more zones if possible. It is important to note that the growth policy is not in itself a regulation. Rather, it is a policy document that guides regulation. And as such, the map designations should not be viewed as fixed lines on a map, and the appropriate zoning district for the property as a whole should be based on growth policy map designations as well as the nature of the existing use of the property, which is parking for the bar, and the existing county zoning that is in place. Under both city and county zoning, B1 zoning matches the existing condition more closely than a residential district. And additionally, the B1 is intended to serve as a buffer zone between higher intensity uses and residential areas. It accomplishes that goal in this situation. And taking into account the growth policy map, existing county zoning, and the existing use, the requested zone of B1 would comply with the growth policy, and applying that district to the entire property would be consistent with the zoning ordinance. We did receive 4 public comments at the public hearing, which were primarily related to the future development of the property. With that, the Kalispell City Planning Commission adopted staff report K-2401 as findings of fact and recommended that the City Council annex the property with an initial zoning designation of B1 neighborhood business, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for staff? Just have one, when you talk about aggregate, or the boundary line adjustments of, or what are we looking at?
Correct,
with
right.
aggregate?
So there's actually several properties that run through the parking lot. I think there's 3 that come down through there. And then you'd have the other one that was being annexed in, which was part of the subdivision adjoining it. So I guess there'd be 4 parcels in there. So as part of their project, they would need to aggregate those into a single parcel, and they do that through a surveyor.
Any other questions? Any public comment on Resolution 6188 or Ordinance 1918? Anything online? No? Okay, then I'm going to look to council for motion on Resolution 6188. Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move we adopt resolution number 6188, a resolution to provide for the alteration of the boundaries of the city of Kalispell by including therein as an annexation certain real property described as tract of land in Block 3 of Phillips Addition to Kalispell in the southeast quarter of Section 8, Township 28 North, Range 21 West, PM, Montana, Flathead County, more particularly described as Lot 12 of said Block 3 of Phillips Addition to Kalispell, and that portion of the abandoned alley adjoining the west line of Lot 12 and the east line of Lots 13 through 16 of said Block 3 of Phillips Addition to Kalispell, per road abandonment number 522, to be known as Woodland Park Apartments, addition number 469, to zone said property in accordance with the Kalispell zoning ordinance and to be declared an effective date.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Graham. Discussion on the motion? Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, I think it's a good infill project, bringing it into the city and getting some more multifamily in the city. It's great.
Any other discussion? All right, roll call vote.
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabriel,
Aye.
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, motion carries. Look for a motion on ordinance 1918, the initial zoning. Mr. Graham?
Thank you, Your Honor. I move ordinance number 1918, an ordinance to amend section 27.02.010 official zoning map, City of Kalispell zoning ordinance number 1677 by zoning certain real property, more particularly described as a tract of land in Block 3 of Phillips Addition to Kalispell in the southeast quarter of Section 8, Township 28 North, Range 21 West, PMM, Montana, Flathead County, more particularly described as Lot 12 of said Block 3 of Phillips Addition to Kalispell, and that portion of the abandoned alley adjoining the west line of Lot 12 and the east line of Lots 13 through 16 of said Block 3 of Phillips Addition to Kalispell, per road abandonment number 522, previously zoned County R5, two-family residential, to City B1 Neighborhood Business in accordance with the Kalispell Growth Policy, Planet 2035, and to provide an effective date.
Second.
Second, thank you, Ms. Carlson. Discussion on the motion? No?
Nope.
You know, to me, I look at this and I think it makes complete sense. Looking at the neighboring properties, I like the conversion. I actually like the consolidation of the lots and looking at really future apartment project close to Woodland Park. I mean, to me, there's some natural transition of this neighborhood that's been in the county, coming in, getting under water and sewer and adding, as you say, more high-density housing, which is always, at this point, something we still kind of need around here. So anxious to see this move forward and see what comes up with any future application on the actual project itself. Have a roll call vote.
Counselor Dahlman,
Aye.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Aye.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye. Motion carries. Next item, Resolution of Intent 6189, Land Use Public Participation Plan. This item considers setting a public hearing date of March 18, 2024 to take comments on this plan. Mr. Russell?
Yeah, Mayor and Council, this is a resolution to set a date for a public hearing, but I will ask our senior planner, PJ Sorensen, just to give a little bit of a background related to this. I know there's been a lot of talk about this and some of the history and how it got to where it's at. So, PJ, if you don't mind.
All right, thank you. Mayor, Council, as City Manager mentioned, there has been a little bit of background to this. As you're all aware, Senate Bill 382 kind of reformulates land use planning in the state of Montana, starting with the land use plan and then following that up with updates to zoning regulations and subdivision regulations. One of the important parts of that is establishing a public participation plan because under the new statutory scheme, you're moving public comment, particularly in relation to subdivisions, to the creation of that land use plan and moving it away from a site-specific project that's going on. So we've been working with our planning commission since last fall and putting together this public participation plan, which would guide how we would bring in the public comment in the formulation of the plan and regulations. We had a couple work sessions, I think November and December. We had a public hearing at the last planning commission meeting, and they forwarded a recommendation. So our next steps here would be the resolution of intent to hold the public hearing at the next council meeting on March 18th. And we'll do a more in-depth presentation then on what we were looking at. So if there's any questions on that, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for staff? Any public comment? Oh, you had a question?
Yeah, I have a question. So we're talking about the land use plan. I would think that goes and kind of jives with what we'd have as a growth policy, correct?
Right. Currently, it's a growth policy, but the new language under 382, which has now been codified, would kind of refer to that as a land use plan. So it's very similar to what our growth policy is. There's a lot more in-depth in terms of housing. A few things are tweaked in how you put that together. But the guiding document, as we start into that, and I guess one thing to note is currently there's a 3-year window that we're about a year into, not quite a year into, to adopt not just that land use plan, but then those regulations that flow from that. And this land use public participation plan is what's going to give us that path to bring in that public comment as we're formulating the land use plan and those regulations. So it's one of the first steps that we're doing in this process. The other one, which we recently did, was the transition from the planning board into the planning commission. So those are kind of two of the initial steps to set the stage for moving forward with the meatier parts.
And the participation plan, the the PPP. So when I'm seeing this, I'm seeing adopting, amending, or updating a land use plan. So when we do that with the growth policy, I mean, we already do that.
Right, and I guess the format that it's coming in as is an amendment to the growth policy, and that's how it's getting plugged in. And that's why the resolution would be done that way. But this is really about the new land use plan.
Okay, got it. So then the other thing about this is that this is front-loaded on the actual land use plan itself as far as the public participation, and does not have participation for site-specific projects.
Right, and that's one of the things, and again, at the public hearing, we'll kind of go through some of the specific items that are in there.
Well, and the reason why I'm asking these questions is because hopefully this gets out here, because I want people to show up to this and give their, their public comment on this, because it's important for them to know. I think I know the answer to my question, but.
Yeah, but to emphasize that, there's at least, I think, 3 spots in that public participation plan, and that's called out in the statute as well, that throughout the entire process, you really need to emphasize that, yes, we're shifting, and it's mandated by the state legislature, but we're shifting public comment from site-specific reviews when a subdivision comes in or CUPs come in to the formulation of that plan, that land use plan, and not having specific public hearings when a development comes in. If they come in with a plan or with a project that meshes with our plan and regulations, that's just done administratively once we're under that. So yes, we're really trying and want to encourage public involvement upfront, because that's the theory behind this new statutory scheme.
Right, and it's important to note that that is state mandated. This came from the state for it to be set up this way, and so that's why I'm asking these questions, is I want people to show up.
Yes, there's 10 cities in the state that this was mandated for. It's optional in other cities, but Kalispell was one based on size, and in the county of our size where we're required to.
And I guess to clarify as well, the public hearing come up won't be the last opportunity for the public to comment.
Right.
This is the opportunity to comment on our public comment process going into the land use plan. So throughout the land use plan, there's going to be a lot of opportunity to comment on that as well. And that will be up for adoption to council at a future date as well, actually adopting the plan and adopting the updated ordinances and such.
Any other questions for staff? Any public comment on resolution of intent 6189?
Mary Flowers, Citizens for Better Flathead, 135 South Main here. I appreciate Chad's comments, and I think this is a very important issue for the public to take note of. We have not had an opportunity yet to go through the draft proposal, but we will be going through it and encouraging the public to attend your hearing. We think that the legislature has really done a disservice to our communities by reducing public comment. We think local control is a really important function of city government, and that on the ground, over and over, last 30 years, I can't tell you how many planning board meetings I've sat through at cities or county hearings, and there is always good public comment that results in a better plan. And unfortunately, this change by the legislature also means that unelected officials are making decisions on issues that we think should still be within the public realm. When we looked at the Whitefish recently adopted their plan, and one of the things we noted in there that their growth policy did not come back to the council for a final vote, and that was one of the issues we raised. So I would definitely make sure that your growth policy comes back to this council, because within that, you are making a lot of commitments, and I think you have the ability to provide additional notice, and that's one of the things I think Whitefish tried to do, was to make sure there was additional notice when decisions were being made. So even within the limits of this law, which I hope is overturned, quite frankly. And I would encourage this council to consider joining in on an amicus brief to call for that. There are good parts of this legislation. It requires more data for communities to make decisions on. It doesn't provide the funding for you to get that data, but that needs to be addressed as well. But data-rich decisions benefit us all. They save us all money. They make good decisions. That's a good part of this bill, but removing public participation is not. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment? See none. Mr. Dowd.
Your Honor, I move resolution number 6189, a resolution of intent to enact a land use public participation plan as required by section 76-25-106 Montana Code annotated of the Montana Land Use Planning Act in order to provide continuous public participation when adopting, amending, and updating a land use plan or regulations pursuant thereto, setting a public hearing and directing the city clerk to provide notice thereof.
Second.
Second. Thank you, Mr. Fisher. You need some mouthwash because you said as directed or as required, and I know that you have distaste.
Yeah, well, we all don't like this. We're doing it.
Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you. Just speak to the legislation that, this is one part of it that I don't entirely agree with, the public participation part of it. I think they could have done it a different way, a better way to make for a stronger process and not totally cut out the public participation on an individual level, but individual project level. But this is what we have from the state legislature, and so I just really think it's important that the public pay attention to this part of the process, because undoubtedly we will have folks who at the project level will be like, where was my opportunity? And they will not have heard of this. No matter how hard we try, they will not know that this process happened. And so hopefully we have a plan that's as robust enough that we can do the best we can to get that information out there and get participation, even though we know some folks just won't hear about it. But I think it's a good plan, and so I look forward to implementing it.
Mr. Dodd?
Thanks, Your Honor. The legislation that this is based upon, I think, is a very big overreach by state government, forcing things down on local cities that should have the ability to adjust their city to meet the population's demands and requirements. I don't like the process at all. I do hope that it gets struck down at some point, but since it's mandatory, I'm even wondering why we have to approve anything, because they're just making us do it. I'm reluctantly going ahead with this, but I do really, really encourage public participation, because you can at least tweak this a little bit to be more favorable to what you want for Kalispell. Thank you.
Other discussion? I think I'm just going to make a couple comments. One, Ms. Flowers, when you step up and you say Citizens for a Better Flathead, I have a new nickname for the 2023 Montana State Legislature, Citizens for Worse Governance. Because this is what we've seen, as you said, Mr. Dowd, is an overreach. It's an incredible overreach. The fact that we're stripping the public's voice at the local level, the government closest to the people, to me, it just violates every Republican principle that's on the Republican Party platform, and dare I say even the Democratic Party platform. The fact that we have, I said this on the radio this morning, I was on KGEZ for full disclosure, you can go listen to it, commented that what's really frustrating as mayor and for this council, and soon for the public to find out in Kalispell, Whitefish, Columbia Falls, is we elect people to the state legislature. We elect a governor to the state of Montana who've never served on city councils. They don't understand the process of incorporating public comment into our neighborhoods. And we've made modifications to zoning, to applications, conditional use permits based on public comment. That's a collaborative process that is politics. And the fact that we have people who have no experience, no understanding, pulling local control to Helena to where they believe they know better than us, to me is a disgusting abuse of power. So I want to encourage the public comment and the public participation so we get people in this room, because the next legislative session, we need people from here, not just us, but we need people from here going back to Helena and telling those people that we send to Helena, listen here. Listen to the people from your hometown. It's critical, and they don't do it. I mean, it's worse at the federal level. It's gotten ungodly bad at the state level, and we've never had it that bad. So I encourage the public comment, the public participation through the process. I ask the public to join us as a council. And as you said, I hope this legislation goes down in flames. I would love to see us as a body participate in an amicus brief. And I know, Mr. Hunter, you had some opposition to that at one time. What I'm hearing tonight isn't necessarily so much worried about the NIMBY side. There is good public participation, but we have to have advancement, we have to have work, but we can make things better at the local level. The problem making Kalispell suffer for other communities that don't allow a thing and making us suffer under this is ridiculous. And I have more to say on that later when we get to another section tonight. So anyway, can I have a roll call vote?
Counselor Dahlman?
Aye.
Counselor Fisher?
Aye.
Counselor Hunter?
Aye.
Counselor Nunley?
Aye.
Counselor Carlson?
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle?
Aye.
Counselor Graham?
Aye.
Counselor Dowd?
Aye.
Mayor Johnson?
Aye, motion carries. Next item, the fifth item, sludge management agreement with Glacier Gold LLC. This item considers an updated agreement for disposal of sewage sludge, AKA human waste. Mr. Russell.
Mayor and Council, I'll turn it over to Director of Public Works, Susie Turner, to give the staff report.
No. Good evening, Your Honor and council members. Before you tonight is the recommendation to adopt the updated sludge management agreement with Glacier Gold. The city has had a sludge management agreement with Glacier Gold since 1993. It is our primary source of disposal for our biosolids, our digested organic waste that does go through our wastewater treatment plant. We, again, primary disposal. Without this agreement, we actually have no place to bring our biosolids besides a couple loads to the landfill on a weekly basis. So just wanted to make that very clear that we don't really have any other options at this point other than to extend the agreement. That being said, we've worked with Glacier Gold for many years. They're a good partner to have as a part of this agreement. Our current agreement with Glacier Gold will expire March 31st of this year. We did take some time to work with Glacier Gold. There are a couple items that were updated in comparison to the current agreement for the proposed agreement that's in front of council tonight. The first one is the cost per dry tons. The cost per dry tons for the first year is to remain the same. They didn't want to negotiate on the price for the tipping fee. However, starting in 2025, there is an option that the price could be negotiated for us to be able to dispose of our waste at Glacier Gold. If there is an increase in that cost, the agreement would need to be changed and we would bring that in front of council for approval. So that would happen the spring of next year if that were the case. The second item that is changed is In the previous agreement, they were written for 5-year terms with the option to extend it for another 5 years. Glacier Gold at this time was not willing to update the agreement for a 5-year term. They only wanted to have the agreement with a 1-year term limit with the option to extend annually for 5 years. And if you can imagine, it's because they probably next year want to negotiate the price. We've been paying the same tipping fee to Glacier Gold for 10 years. They just didn't want to do that negotiation at this time. So that's why I imagine you didn't want to do it at 5 years at a time. So with that, the rest of the agreement is relatively the same as the current agreement. We do recommend the approval of the agreement, and I'm happy to answer any questions council might have.
Any questions for staff? Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. I've used Glacier Gold for my gardening. I know I have many constituents who do the same, and I was struck by the public comment this evening. I'm wondering if we've done any kind of looking into the safety aspects of, obviously I know because it's treated, there are certain things we test for at our wastewater treatment plant, but there are some things we don't, pharmaceuticals. I don't know if we test for PFAS type stuff, but in terms of looking into some of these other things, other potential contaminants that aren't tested for, and what kind of safety risk there is for folks using it for gardening purposes.
Yes, so currently PFAS is not a regulated waste, so we have not sampled for it. So as a part of our sampling procedures or requirements, PFAS is not a component of that, so we have not sampled for PFAS in our biosolids at this time.
Yeah, so we haven't looked at any of those.
Nope.
And so then I presume also that we haven't looked at any legal risk that might be involved in that.
No, sir. At this time, PFAS is not a regulated contaminant.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for staff? Mr. Nunley?
Guess it's always worth being number 2 in this crappy topic. So I just want to ask a quick question on, we do not bring in any septage from porta potties. We are only dealing with our own solid waste.
That's correct. So the wastewater we receive comes from the city's sewer collection system and from the Evergreen system.
Okay, so the county's waste and any porta potty use that happens within the city, that gets sprayed on fields untreated at this point.
Land applied, that's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Fisher, safe to go number 3.
Excuse me?
It's safe to be number 3 now.
Good point. I do think it's important to point out that this product is licensed by the Montana Department of Health and Environmental Sciences and Department of Agriculture. They have quite a stringent process. They go through in approving anything. So as far as a legal concern, there's a much bigger picture that has approved this method for the city's contract, in my opinion.
Is that a question?
It's not a question.
Thank you for the point of order, Mr. Dowd. Want to maybe strike that as a question? Am I right?
I got to get better at this.
I have a question to follow up
Mr.
on that. Do we know whether the Montana Department of Health and Environment tests for any of these contaminants that we do not test for?
In what regards?
In terms of determining that it's safe for this type of use?
So it's important to not turn a blind eye. It is an emerging contaminant that is coming our way. So it's important to make sure that we stay in tune with EPA and their determinations on contaminants and what levels they'll be regulated at. At this point, it's unknown what type of regulation limits will be applied to composting. They're still working through the process. So I'd love to give you answers on all that, but there are no answers to really provide. Again, we're staying in tune with it. I think we need to ask the questions, or what would we do to be prepared if they are regulated waste? So we are actively participating and acknowledging those conversations that are going on, but there is zero direction on where regulated biosolid waste with PFAS in it will go.
Yeah, and I understand the regulation side, but there's also an aspect of public health. I mean, if we had information that there was a public health risk, even if EPA hasn't caught up with that yet and regulated it, that we would have a responsibility to factor that information into our decision-making, even if there was no regulatory obligation there.
If I can jump in on that, that becomes a subjective component where we're taking place of EPA in terms of that, not cautioning council against doing that. In a case of the action item tonight, we're talking about a third-party entity. They would be under their regulation. We're contract with them. We have an assumption that they are in compliance with all required health standards that are under their regulation. Just as when we have a land application, for example, it's upon us to be in compliance with all those. So we're getting asked some questions here that are beyond our scope in terms of their regulation component. So I just ask council to remember that aspect.
Any other questions? Any public comment on this item?
Jennifer Tipton, 123 Crabtree Lane, Kalispell, Montana. I just wanted to encourage everyone here to watch the PBS documentary on biosolids and land application. We can really fall down a rabbit hole when it comes to PFAS, but it's very eye-opening, and it mentions Glacier Gold by name and Garden City Compost in Missoula. PFAS is used in fire retardants and also waterproof. So its properties are kind of, it attaches to these solids. So biosolids have extremely high concentrate of PFAS. And I know this is all kind of new, and I think, maybe EPA and DEQ even is a little bit dragging their feet because it is such a huge, it's going to be very expensive, but in the news, it pops up constantly on my feed, probably because I click on them and I read them and it just feeds me more, but there are lawsuits coming down all over. Most recently, a resident in Summers forwarded me in Texas, and it is where they were land applying, farmers were land applying for years and years and years, the sludge from the municipal waste treatment plant, and it has essentially rendered their land useless. They can no longer drink from their wells. It's very badly contaminated. And if you watch this documentary, I also used Glacier Gold before I found out what biosolids were. And I will never use it again, ever. And I tell anyone who will listen, because most people don't understand that it is made from human waste. And the amount of PFAS, the parts per trillion that were tested and found in that compost were startling, to say the least. Far beyond anything that EPA, their allowable is, they would like to say 0, but that's impossible. So I believe they have it at 0.02 parts per trillion. It was much higher than that in the compost. I encourage everyone to watch it and inform yourselves, because it's a dangerous substance. The health effects are, it's not good. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Mary Flowers, Citizens for Greater Flathead. One thing I wanted to add is clarification. The question on porta potties. I believe that the city of Columbia Falls is the only facility that does take porta potties, and that they are still continuing to do that. It's a changing field, but I think that's what the current practice is. little over half, and Susie can correct me on this, of the human waste that city does produce goes to the landfill. That's Columbia Falls brings their biosolids human waste to the landfill. Whitefish brings theirs to the landfill. Lakeside is the only one that does the spray application process and now a groundwater injection process. One of the interesting things is when the county put in the methane gas collection, having that extra moisture that comes from this human waste does add to the methane gas and generates more electricity. So the landfill has been it is permitted to take this, and it is a energy producing byproduct of that process. Whether or not the city could take all of their waste there is a question that I've asked the Solid Waste Board to start to look at. What is the limits? And there are some limits because they have to have enough solid material to bury that into to accept it on a regular basis. They can't just have people or communities randomly bringing this in. The lakeside, if they do the county septic waste, they're planning to take it to the county landfill, the solids. So there's a lot of moving parts here that as a community we have to start asking questions about. Regulations are also coming down for landfills that are going to require testing for chemicals like PFAS in the leachate from the landfills. And landfills are required to manage that leachate. So it's not that it's anyone's fault, it's not that it's anyone's not doing their due diligence, it's that we've got a real problem that we have to start asking serious questions about. And while I know you want to pass this agreement tonight, I would still encourage you to have your city attorney look at it, look at what other communities are putting into their contracts. And to an extent, it's to an advantage to you that right now they're only requiring a 1-year contract. So you do have some time to think about this as well, but it is a serious issue, and it's not just PFAS, it's the microplastics, it's the pharmaceuticals, and it's just a new reality for us all. Thank you.
Thank you.
Martin Ribbons, I reside 745 3rd Avenue East, Kalispell. Spent my life in the horticulture business, mostly in Southern California. There's a company there that since around 1910, 1915 has taken sewer sludge, produced a product called nitrohumus, and used it for many, many years. And the test is horticulturally, not scientifically, but tomato seeds do not dissolve through all these processes. And so nitrohumus, you use that, you're always going to get tomatoes. And so that was our test. Not very scientific, but it grew tomatoes.
Nothing. So, the public comment, look to council for action here. Mr. Dowd.
Your Honor, I move to approve the updated sludge management agreement with Glacier Gold.
Second.
Second, thank you, Ms. Gabriel. Motion second, discussion. Mr. Dowd.
If I may speak to my motion, Your Honor, thank you. So there are emerging concerns that are going to come out of here, and emerging regulations that are probably going to come down in short order from EPA, DEQ down to us. And we do understand that for sure. I think it's really important that we first identify that Glacier Gold is a private company. And at the time when those regulations hit, as far as the end product is concerned, they're going to be on the hook to do the testing and meet compliance. We're going to be in the same boat because we're going to have to do it here at our water treatment plant before it even gets made into that sludge. So I'm in favor of continuing this right now as we take a deeper look into it. I do understand the concerns, but maybe this is just my mind, but I think it's a way more horrifying just to take this stuff to the dump right now. So I don't know what that does to our wells in the long run, right? So I don't know what the answer to this is, but for right now, as we take a look at this, as we receive these regulations, I say that we continue our program with Glacier Gold and see where we're going to end up after more information comes out and we understand how we need to treat this. Thanks.
Okay. Mr. Fisher, and then I'll just.
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with much of what Mr. Dowd said, and I also understand Ms. Flowers and the contract only being 1 year could be a benefit. I think a lot will come out in the next year. We could learn a lot, but I too will be voting for this agreement tonight.
Mr. Hunter?
Thank you, Your Honor. If I may return to one question about the agreement. In terms of the extending after 1 year, is that it will definitely be coming back to council for any extension, or is that made by staff, potentially?
If there is no change to the current language that's adopted tonight, then we can automatically extend it each year administratively as a part of the contract.
Okay.
If there are terms within the contract that are proposed to be changed, then I'll bring it forward back in front of council. One of those could be the tipping costs.
Okay, thank you. So, yeah, I mean, I have a lot of questions about the situation. I think to the comment about some of these different risks, some of it's water quality, right? And that's one consideration. Using it for compost, a lot of people are using it in gardens. I'd have a question, how much of this stuff can be uptake by plants and consumed in that way? So there's a question there. There's talk about microplastics. You probably have microplastics everywhere, and there's probably no avoiding it, and I don't think they can be uptake by plants, so that may not be as much of a concern. Maybe I'm wrong. But there's a lot of questions there. To me, it goes beyond the issue of what's our regulatory responsibility. Obviously, that's an important consideration. But as a governing body, we can look at the preponderance of evidence, scientific evidence, and come to our own conclusion about whether or not this is a risk that we are comfortable putting out in the community in that way, and we don't have to rely entirely on EPA or DEQ to act first. That's my opinion about it. So it sounds like there is some evidence. They're already making documentaries about it. That's a pretty bad sign. So I would like to move to amend the agreement. First, before I get there, a recognition that we do not have an alternative place for this, right? So we're in a bind. And so obviously we're not in a place to stop it at this point because we have no place to take it. So with that, I feel like our hand is a little bit forced here. But I would like to amend the agreement so that it is for a 1 year term only, and that the option of renew it for an extended time period would have to come before council. And in that 1 year time period, we look further into these issues, the risks, both legal and health for the community, and we have more information to judge this on in a year's time.
Your Honor, if I may. Yep. So an amending of this agreement nullifies the signed agreement that is before you, and there is no guarantee that it'll be agreed to in its current form with that amendment. So I just bring that forward to council. This has been the standard warrant, which is why we brought it forward. So that's just something to consider, that basically you're saying no to the contract as presented. There's no guarantee that there's another one coming back. Just something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Mr. Russell, could Mr. Hunter perhaps reword that and request that it come back for discussion rather than having it be part of the contract? Just request that it come back for council to discuss before another one is signed without nullifying this particular agreement?
No, because you're
Okay.
saying that you're not going to agree to another one.
No, before staff automatically signs it.
The contract is for automatic renewal without any changes.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
I would just say that, Glacier Gold is entering into this agreement presumably because there's some benefit to them that they see it as valuable. So I think if we went to them, they get 1 year rather than no deal, they'll take that 1 year over if we are rejecting the one before us. So I don't think there's a great risk.
Your Honor, I'm going to do a
that'd
point of
be
order.
rejected.
I don't think we have a second, do we?
We don't have a second yet.
So, I mean, we'll just have discussion if there's going to be a second.
Just clarifying, we had questions, and it's one of those. Do we have a
Clarify my
second?
amendment. Yeah.
The
Sorry.
amendment? Okay.
No, I'm confused. Where are we on
We
the
have,
amendment?
we have a motion to amend the contract
Okay,
to go to a 1-year term with renewal by council, correct?
Correct.
Correct.
That's why I asked that question.
yeah, and from what I got from that, from his answer, from the city manager's answer on that was that we can't adjust the contract. If we try to adjust the contract, it just gets nullified, so it's the same as voting against it, right? So it has to go back to them, be adjusted, re-signed, the whole deal. Is that correct?
I'd give us a pause here for just a
Pause
moment.
for a second.
What's that?
Give us a pause here for just a minute.
That's fine.
As we're looking at the actual language within there.
That sounds good. Appreciate you looking into it.
So we can identify that the language stating that's agreed upon by mutual parties includes the council as that party.
So we would be. the
So if
ones
you
that
want
automatically
to
would-
direct staff to bring it back to you before it is agreed upon for an additional year, that is direction that council can provide.
Perfect.
Because I think that language within the contract can allow that flexibility.
Then we wouldn't
So-
need an amended motion.
Yeah, so I can retract my statement about it nullifying it.
Okay.
But we wouldn't need an amendment per se. What we would need is a direction to staff to bring
Yeah.
it back next year. Not a change to the contract, but I agree with you, Mr. Hunter. Another look in a year with those activities, to me, makes complete sense.
Sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, so I would agree. No amendment is needed, just direction to staff that.
Okay.
Just to clarify on that, because we're not the only party to the agreement, we can go to them and say, this is our interpretation. They could legally say, we don't agree with that interpretation.
They just wouldn't mutually agree to an extension. I think is the only thing that's there, but there's nothing that says they'd mutually agree to an extension anyway.
Yeah, okay.
So I think we're safe in that avenue, having looked more closely upon the components of there.
Okay.
You want to withdraw your amendment?
Yeah, I'll withdraw my amendment.
Okay.
Thank you.
So we're back to the original motion. Discussion on the original motion. Any other discussion?
Well, I'm just going to echo in just to say, yes, I think we need to move forward with this agreement, but I think we definitely need to start looking at this as a bigger topic. And I think, county was certainly doing a lot of work in that. I think there's others that could definitely get involved, so I encourage that.
Any other discussion? I agree, our backs are against the wall at this point. We don't know, can we take it to the landfill, sitting on the board at the landfill? There's times they get a little backed up. Sorry, I said that, and as I said that, sorry, but that said, I think, Mr. Hunter, I almost gave you a second. I was that close. I just don't want to go back to another signature. But the mutually agreed upon language, I think directing staff at this point to have them bring the contract back for further discussion, but I think it's also a topic we look at a future work session. What is out there? Because we will see regulation coming down this line, and I think maybe next week when we're in DC, we can inquire. We meet with EPA while we're there. Maybe while you guys are at the league, I'll go to EPA, Doug.
Maybe we could ship it.
Wow.
Ship it to DC.
We'll ship it to DC. There's enough of that there anyway. But as we look at this, the other side of this that we have to look at is we're one side. We're the input of their product. If we're starting to see documentaries, we're starting to see this activity, the market will also speak. And the question is, what happens if, boy, we don't have Glacier Gold now as an outlet for this? So no matter what, I've always been a little nervous with that. It's a sole provider for service for a product that, what do we do with that if we lose them? Because we are reliant on them.
Yeah, and we're veering a little bit off of
Yeah.
the agenda item here, but I think it's good to be aware of. We had a compost facility in the capital improvement plan, and actually we're looking at land acquisitions at one point, and even identified some land that we currently own as for that. Those discussions faded when it looked like the county was going to build a composting facility. So we let them take that run. Does not look like that is going to occur. So that'll come back before council in terms of own municipal one, which would resolve a lot of this discussion points in terms of the city's role in
Glacier Gold.
regulation adherence and anything related to that. So that will actually be something that does come back before council, more than likely as part of the budget package this year. So there definitely will be more opportunities to discuss.
Because, speak a little bit more, the end result is when we process sewage, we have a byproduct. We have to do something with it somewhere. And I know that creates an issue, but on the flip side, we don't have a sewer system treating sewage. What does everyone use? Septic systems. I'll maintain at least dealing with that point load, we have control of it. And we don't have the other problem that we have with septic systems. So I'll vote in support at this point in time, especially with a 1 year look at this coming back.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can I ask just one last question? And I don't know if it's Mr. Russell or if it's Ms. Turner, but do I remember correctly that we're limited how many loads we can take to the landfill? So we're also in a bind there?
That's correct. We've worked with the landfill over the last several years to develop like an optimum amount of sludge they're willing to receive from the city of Kalispell and Columbia Falls and Whitefish. So we've met with the county semi-annually to go over what it means to take on our biosolids and the other cities' biosolids. So, but yeah, we're pretty much limited to 2 loads per week at this time, with the options every now and then during the springtime when we have a little bit more biosolids than normal, they'll take a 3rd load just at a special request. So, but that's pretty much the max that they've been willing to take from us, which is more than what was before. So we're really appreciative. If you'll recall, and these conversations go back quite a few years now, Glacier Gold, we also have capacity limitations at Glacier Gold. So that was one of the reasons we originally looked at developing our own composting facility, because we knew at some point Glacier Gold was going to be out of capacity to be able to take all of the city of Kalispell's biosolids. So we're kind of back at that point right now. So the wastewater treatment plant manager and I actually met last week to review our biosolids alternative plan. This is like a 2018 plan. So we're going through those options, because we are going to need to look at different alternatives to manage our biosolids. And we need to ask ourselves if we want to build a composting facility, if that's the right treatment for our biosolids. So we are having those conversations. Back in 2018, PFOS was not a prevalent point of conversation. So we're looking at a little bit different environmental atmosphere as we talk through these things. So definitely, we'll be bringing information back in front of council as we work through it.
Mr. Hunter, and then we'll go to.
Yeah, just one additional comment. Point made by public comment, but in terms of coming back a year from now, also looking at whether or not, if we are looking at continuing with Glacier Gold, looking at that labeling issue and whether or not there needs to be kind of more robust disclosure or whatever as part of a condition of the agreement or something like that. Just something to look at for a year from now when we're coming back and discussing this further.
Ms. Dahlman?
Thank you, Your Honor. So with all of this discussion, I was originally going to vote no on this because I do know about the Glacier Gold problems, but since I do feel like our backs are up against the wall and it looks like we're going to be coming back around to discuss this in a year, that's the only reason I'm going to say yes on this, because it's a tough spot. It's a really tough spot. So, thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Dahlman. Any other discussion? A roll call vote?
Counselor Dahlman,
Yes.
Counselor Fisher,
Aye.
Counselor Hunter,
Aye.
Counselor Nunley,
Aye.
Counselor Carlson,
Aye.
Counselor Gabrielle,
Aye.
Counselor Graham,
Aye.
Counselor Dowd,
Aye.
Mayor Johnson.
Aye, motion carries. City manager report, Mr. Russell.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, a few things to update Council on. First one is, as the Mayor alluded to, we have meetings next week with National League of Cities, so we won't be having a work session. Next item is ballots are out for the dedicated emergency response levy, so encourage everyone to register and vote and be educated on the issue. As part of that, and I just have to make one correction that came out, and actually really appreciate the attention that the Interlake has provided for it, and Carl's done a great job of interacting with both the police chiefs to get the right information out there. We met the editorial board. They asked a lot of good questions. A lot of that was reflective in there. Just want to clarify one comment they related to, that they had suggested that council can do more with impact fees to reduce the burden of the levy. The impact fee issue has no bearing on the amount of the levy. The levy is based on costs of personnel and equipment replacement, both things that are not covered. We are deferring some of the personnel costs until the station gets built through a mixture of those funds from the levy that would either go to personnel in the future or a combination of impact fees or grants that we will go after if we can get it. The reality of with the levy is there's no need to build a station that you can't put people in. That's why it's part of the levy itself, is to ensure that that station gets built and that it is staffed. But just want to clarify that impact fees have nothing to do with the amount for this levy because that is personnel and equipment replacement. So just one clarification, but do really appreciate all the work that the Interlake has done because they've really reached out numerous times to get clarification information with that. But I thought that was a pretty big thing to just publicly hit. And the last item is a little bit more extensive of a report, but I think it's apropos by, even discussion we've had and discussion out in the community. And Susie and I had met today about giving a brief update on the PFAS. And as has been identified, holding an open house this Thursday. And I would go back, because one of the core components of it is not a regulated chemical, and it is a very important thing. And, it's a longstanding statement is, in a lot of the work that we do as a municipality is all you have is the code. And when you start veering off the code is when you get in trouble. And it goes the same way with regulation that we're bound to. And that's why we adhere to the code and the regulation. And this is not a regulated item yet. And in fact has changed over time in terms of their recommended advisory levels. So it is important to remember that aspect of it. So as we were talking about it, I will defer this portion of the city manager report to Susie, who will do a much better job of talking about the history of that. If you'll bear with us for about 5-10 minutes, a little bit more extensive of a manager's report, but I think fairly important at this time, just to present information to the council. And again, a lot of this will be shared on Thursday night for the general public as well, for some interaction and a lot more opportunity for some direct questions related from the public. So Susie, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Thank you, Doug. Your Honor and council members, Doug asked me to just take a brief moment to kind of give a little bit of background on PFAS. We did meet back in 2022, and I did give an emerging contaminant presentation, which included PFAS, and we talked about drinking water and wastewater as a component of that. So this has been a continued conversation that we'll continue to have the conversation and stay on top of. But if you recall, PFAS are the general term for thousands of chemicals that are your fluorocarbon compounds as a part of that. But in general, those PFAS are broken into really 6 main compounds that we will see potential regulations come forward as a part of. Well, these chemicals have been around since the 1940s. You'll find your older chemicals are your PFOA and your PFOS, or PFOS, excuse me. Those are kind of your older chemicals, and they're very prevalent in the environment. They're because that's what they were made for as a part of it, and it takes them a long time to break down. So those are prevalent in the environment. PFAS are in your water, your air, and your soils. Any Google search, you will find PFAS in water, air, and soil. So again, there's a lot of information out there on the internet. But so we got the PFOAs, we got the PFAS. Those are your kind of your older, longer chain compounds, and then you move into your more recent chemical compounds, which are kind of your newer ones. So they phased out the PFOA and PFAS around 2000, and they started to generate alternative chemicals that kind of replace their function. So those are your Gen X chemicals, your I can't even read it, sorry. PFHXSs, your PFHAs. I'm sorry, I can't honestly read it.
PFNA.
Did I get it?
NA. PFNA.
Oh, PFNA and your PFBSs. So those are kind of your newer chemicals that we see that are a little bit more prevalent, and the EPA has a little bit more information on, and that's why they come out with the health advisories on those specific chemicals. So the products that PFAS are in are very vast. They're in your products that are non-stick. They're waterproof. It's your stain resistance, your wrinkle-free products. They're on your non-stick cookware. It's your waterproof clothing. The firefighting foam, the AFFF, it is a pretty prevalent PFAS, and that's kind of your older compound. To date, if you were to talk to our fire chief, we haven't used the AFFF in over 20 years in Kalispell. So it's not a source in this area that our department has used as a part of that. So PFAS is used in your cosmetics. It's in your perfumes. It's on your popcorn bag. So again, it's very prevalent chemical compounds that have been used in our society for many years. As far as PFAS go for regulations, at this point, it is an unregulated emerging contaminant. So there are 0 regulations that we are required to adhere to for the drinking water standards. Now, there are proposed drinking water standards that EPA is working on right now, and we'll go through what those are in a second. But we will have rules coming down. When that is, it might be this year, it might be next year. They've gone through the public hearing process, so they are very far along in developing that process. So we know it's coming, and it will be a regulated drinking water standard. What those regulations are going to be exactly, we don't know yet either. We have some proposed limits on certain chemicals that we know of, and we'll talk to those also. So if you wouldn't mind focusing on that chart that I have in front of you. And I'm gonna zoom in on my screen, if you don't mind. Oh, that worked really good. Huh. Okay, so the sampling efforts that Kalispell has done in 2014 and 2015, we sampled our water sources for PFAS. We sampled that as part of the UCMR rule, the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. So it's EPA's rule that says every public water supply over 10,000, serving over 10,000 square people, serving over 10,000 population, you get to sample a certain list of contaminants that we think are emerging and coming forward. So, and we do it about every 3 to 5 years. We get this list and we have to sample it. In 2014-15, PFAS were a part of that list. They're called UCMR 3s. We sampled it and we got 0 detects in our sources. I'm going to preface that with technology. So we, since 2015, instrumentation and analysis technology has definitely improved. So we are better at analyzing now in 2024 than we were in 2015. We can detect down to much lower levels. So it doesn't mean that weren't there, but it means that we couldn't analyze it down to those really low levels that they're analyzing it today. So in 2022, DEQ approached Public Works and asked us if we would do some voluntary sampling on PFAS. They had some monies introduced to the state, and we did do some voluntary sampling. We sampled 5 of our wells as a part of that process. And the outcome of that is we did get some detects in our Armory well. So if you want to focus on the results column, you'll see in the Armory well, we did get a detect of 2.6 parts per trillion for PFOS. And then we sampled it again because we were amazed that there was anything in our wells. And we did get another detect of 3.3 parts per trillion in our Armory well. For PFHXSs, we also got detects of 2.7 parts per trillion, and we sampled it again and we got 3.3 parts per trillion. I think at this point then we need to look at what are the proposed MCLs that are coming out. If you look at the proposed MCL column for the PFOS, that's 4 parts per trillion. So for our Armory well, on those sampling events, we were below the proposed regulations that could be coming down. At this point, I think it's really important to also recognize that the 4 parts per trillion is the maximum contaminant level.
Reporting limit of the analytic liquid.
Yeah, so it's an MCL, maximum contaminant level, but a lot of those times those are really close to the reporting levels. So in today's technology, there's not, they can't go below 4 parts per trillion and accurately measure PFAS or PFOS as a part of that. So the numbers that we're even getting are below those detection limits. So those numbers themselves are a little bit subjective because they're below the limits of technology for analyzing the contaminants. So it just kind of gives you a little perspective of how small of a part per trillion is and how hard it is to actually do the analysis part of it. I don't want to minimize that we got detects, but I think it's really important to understand what those detects mean for us. Okay, so fast forward to 2023, UCMR 5s came out. Those are 29, was it 29? Yes. So a total of 29 different PFAS chemicals that we sampled for as a part of UCMR 5s. We sampled those in January and we sampled those in July. In January, our complete sample set, we got 0 detects. So we didn't get any detects in January at all. We sampled in July and we got a detect in Armory for the PFHXS at 3.6 parts per trillion. So we did get another hit in Armory for that July sample. Comparing that to the proposed MCLs, we're below the limit if we want to have some comparisons. Now, Grandview is a different situation. In the July sampling events, we did come back with detects at our Grandview well. So we came back with a 6.6 part per trillion detect for PFOS in our Grandview well, which is 1.6 parts per trillion above what the proposed MCL is potentially going to be. So we are above it a little bit if that were the regulation. If you go to the PFHXs for Grandview, we got a detect of 5 parts per trillion, and that, if we compare it to the proposed MCL, is below the limit also on that. So that's kind of where we're at with the sampling events that we have performed to date, and what's in our water system at this time.
So, Susie, there were tests in between where we had 0 detects.
Yes. So
It'd almost be nice on this chart to have those, so you kind of see yes, no, yes. I mean, just.
Yeah, it's a really
I know.
busy chart, Your Honor. I think that's a great catch. Thank you. I tried to have that in number 5 down in the notes.
Right.
That there were no detects, but yeah, I was.
That forces someone to read, and we know that the public, a lot of people.
Yeah. But yeah, I thought about
The
actually
numbers.
doing that.
I didn't read it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think, are there any questions on our sampling?
I was just hoping to maybe address a couple of the questions. I know we'll have a open house on Thursday where we can speak to it, but in terms of the public comment questions, the activity at FVCC that folks are seeing, I know it's not related to this, but what the activity is.
No, there's no correlation. We're rebuilding the Grandview lift station.
The lift
As a
station.
part of that, so no.
Mhm. And then the blending of the water process.
Yeah.
Speak to that, how that works.
I can speak to that a little bit from what I know. So one of the known treatment options is to actually mix the water. It's to minimize the concentration by adding additional water to a concentration. It essentially dilutes it in a way. For us, we currently have this happening automatically. In our water system, all of our sources flow to pipes into storage facilities. So there's just automatically, we already have that happening in our system because of all of our wells that feed to the same piping system and to the storage facility as it goes out. To what extent, I can't tell you that, but it is being blended. As
So
a component.
to our knowledge, there's no part of the city that's receiving more the Grandview or the Armory than other parts in terms of the blending happens before it reaches any resident, right?
The blending happens. To what aspect, in certain areas of town, I can't dive into the explanations or those specific reductions because I don't have the data, honestly. And I wanted to make that very clear. I don't have the data to support what the reduction would be. We don't sample at houses. One of the things I think is really important to understand that PFOS sampling is very sensitive, tricky, and complicated. It's really easy to contaminate the source to contaminate the sample during the sampling because PFOS are everywhere.
If it's raining and our workers are wearing rain gear while they're doing the sampling.
Right? Yeah.
They just ate a cheeseburger.
Yeah. Joe doesn't shower for 2 days.
Then I take the samples.
Jump in and swim around.
So there's definitely very technical protocols involved with sampling to make sure that you don't contaminate your samples with just normal everyday activities. So I think that's really important to recognize that the Grandview detect we have that was higher is one sample set out of 2 that we've taken. So we need to take more samples. So, and we plan on it. So we're going to be doing a sampling event in March. We're going to do one in August and potentially farther in the fall. So we plan on getting more information and more data. So we fully intend to get more data so we can develop potentially a trend line. But at this point, we don't have anything that's really statistically valid that says that we have this direct, constant source coming into our wells at this point. So it's very there's limited information at this time.
And then in terms of funding, if we were having to take some sort of action like drilling new wells, there's a state, I understand, a state funding source that might be a potential that we're looking into.
Yep, that's correct. So the state at this point has significant funds to support emerging contaminants. So we'll be applying for those funds to replace our sources that were affected by an emerging contaminant. So we are moving forward with that. It does take a process to be able to apply for the funds, get approval, and then move forward with the engineering, the selection, the test well. So, but we are actively moving forward with trying to acquire the funds to be able to replace the 2 wells that we've got detects on.
I will comment on that point that I did coincidentally see in the news that there's some evidence that companies that make these chemicals were aware of their health effects potentially. And obviously when you see a headline like that, you think class action lawsuits going to be following at some point in the coming years potentially. So just in terms of tracking costs to us that aren't reimbursed, with the idea that maybe 3 to 5 years from now, there might be some sort of settlement lawsuit being pursued that we might be able to participate in if it gets to that point.
Well, I think it might be sooner.
Might be sooner.
Because we're passing on those results of the tests right now. So, yeah, we're definitely aware of those and are working on the process very much similar to the opioid.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Your Honor. I think credit to city staff. Hearing that you started this as a volunteer basis before anything was required, I think shows a commitment to our citizens that you volunteered up front to begin testing before anything was required. Second, speaking of sensitive testing, it appears that numbers are lower early spring than summer. There could be some correlation to temperature too that they haven't studied in depth. The March studies or testing is always lower, even when they showed up the first time in 2022, although a point or two less, but a significant difference in summer testing numbers. True?
That's correct. Some of that may be related to the groundwater source too. So we have more saturated groundwater in the wintertime versus the summertime. So we may be drawing from a different plume or source farther out in the summertime versus the wintertime. But that's all very speculative. I have 2 data sets, one that shows no detect and one that shows a detect.
Right.
So.
Again, credit to you though for beginning testing earlier than most.
So then I would assume, since we volunteered to do this, if we were asked to do the testing, we're the only ones in the valley that have done this?
I don't know if anybody else did the volunteer testing. I know for the UCMRs, and that's what we did for the testing in 2023, if you're not a population over 10,000, then you're not required to do the UCMR sampling. So you wouldn't have tested for it because it is an unregulated contaminant. So there's no requirement. Who did? Oh.
And that would be a water system of 10,000 or more.
So Joe was thinking that Columbia Falls, did the voluntary testing?
No, they were, so UCMRs pick other municipalities that are below that population threshold that Susie was talking about, and they apply some different regulations to them, like the cost of the samples are funded by EPA when you're at a population underneath those thresholds of 10,000. So I'm aware that Columbia Falls had to take their UCMR 5 samples this year, and they didn't show any detects. And I had a conversation with some Evergreen operators earlier today. They were asking us questions about it, and their UCMR 5 samples will take place in 2025. So the UCMR 5 process had a couple of different years that you could sample in. We happened to choose the first year of the monitoring period, which was 2023. I think the same thing as Columbia Falls.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So yes, other samples have been taken around the valley.
Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, just since we're on the topic of wells, a little bit divergent from the PFAS, but pertaining to the public comment, lower valley activity, I think we talked about potential contaminants, but in terms of like development that could potentially dewater some of our city wells down in that area, is that something that we look at, impacts on, city water service, that sort of thing?
Yeah, we do. Well, we get notices from DNRC if you're within that impact area. I don't recall receiving any information from DNRC about being within that impact area, so I don't recall getting the notice. However, I've had to have an opportunity to speak with Ms. Flowers, and she did show me where that zone of influence is. Our old school station wells are right at the very edge of that boundary. So there is a potential that we would be impacted, but I'm not super concerned about it. I think there was a drawdown of like a foot of water in that aquifer for those wells. So I'm not super concerned about it at this time as far as that type of impact for our old school station wells.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Russell?
Yeah, I think that's it. I don't think you had any more, did you, Susie?
No, that's it.
Like I said,
The open house on Thursday, so we're going to hold the open house in council chambers. So invite the public to come so we can talk through the particulars and give them some really good information on our sampling and what we know and what we're going to do.
Yeah, we just thought it'd be a good, even though, like I say, a little bit of a deviation. I thought it was definitely timely and important to, speak to council related to this. And obviously we've got it going out online. So it's just one more source of education, similar to when we did the work session over a year ago, because we wanted to get that information out that, hey, we're aware of this. We're moving forward on looking at it and really trying to develop additional data. What is the real area? What's the scenario we're looking at? So thank you for appeasing us being able to present this tonight. We just thought it was an important thing. And the only,
Sorry, just, will that meeting be publicly noticed so that if a majority of us show up to that public meeting?
we certainly can. We can put out just that we may have a majority of council members. It's obviously publicly noticed because it's at
Right.
City Hall dealing with it. So we'll be
Okay.
fine, but we can actually put out a thing. It says we may have a quorum as well.
Okay.
So not a problem. And it's from 3 to 7, so it's kind of an ongoing.
Rolling.
Yeah, it's a 3 to 7 open house. We'll have tables set up for people to come in and talk with Joe and I individually or as a group, and we'll have some we'll have stuff up on the screens for people to sit and watch, and then some handouts.
Okay, thank you.
So the only other thing, and then I'll be done, and it's actually just to go back, as I'd mentioned, the impact fees, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, and I had already notified council, that the impact fee review for fire and police is scheduled to come as part of this budgetary session. And, boy, I feel like we've just been hitting all these a lot, but, they're timely and they're due. So we will be doing that impact fee for police and fire later on during this budget season as well. So just another good opportunity to let council know what's coming ahead of us in the process. So that's all I have, Your Honor.
Okay. Anything else from council? Mr. Dowd?
Thank you, Your Honor. And thank you for the presentation. I think that it's important to note that the city of Kalispell, the council, the staff here, we had that working session more than 6 months ago about the PFAS, which was a long session. And we've been talking about it, for a long time. So this is something that we're prepared to engage as soon as we have the engagement parameters. And, you know, I really appreciate city staff jumping right in, because you didn't have to start testing when you started testing. So that's number one. Just a real brief comment on impact fees and how useless they are. I was on the Impact Fee Advisory Committee a while ago, and they are so restricted in what you can use them for. I think it's logical when people hear about them. If you hear about a police impact fee, you think, oh, if we need more policemen, that will fund that. But no, it does not. It only funds structures, buildings. And when we used to have hookup fees, we could have pretty much used those for whatever we needed. So hence the levy. I also wanted to pick up on something that the mayor mentioned earlier, and I thought I've said this before. It's been quite a while, but your city council, and to a lesser extent, the county commissioners, because they actually meet when normal people are working, legislate while looking the public directly in the eye. This is the only level of government that you get that. Everybody else is in their little chambers, and maybe they have a viewing veranda around, but they don't like look you in the eye while they're legislating. It's also important to note that that's not the only time that we're doing our jobs, because we run into people all the time at the grocery store. I had a 45-minute discussion with this guy when I was ice fishing about some city stuff here last weekend. So this is a very impactful position that we're in, where we, you know, work with our fellow community members. City councilors and county commissioners are the only elected officials that understand how decisions made at the federal and state level actually affect people when they hit the ground in your city or county. And I would love to suggest that at least a percentage of our state legislators and U.S. congressmen actually have some council experience. And that's all I had to say, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Dowd. Mr. Hunter?
Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. A couple things. One, it was suggested to me over the weekend that potentially with recycling, that it could be set up in a way that trucks bringing products to the valley come and distribute the products. They're empty, and then they're going back anyway, that they could be filled with recycling material to take to Spokane or wherever. And that was my main objection to moving forward with recycling in the valley. If it is possible to actually fill trucks that are moving anyways, that would change my opinion about that, and I would be supportive of a recycling program, looking at that locally, and you know, even if it's looking at a more limited nature, like was suggested tonight in terms of at schools or something like that. But that did change my calculus on that. And then second, it was mentioned tonight, the CFAC situation up near Columbia Falls. Flathead River does flow just outside the city limits, and our groundwater is essentially an underground river that flows from north to south. And so we potentially could be affected by contaminants up there. And so I would be supportive of joining in a letter similar to the county and asking for a pause in that and reconsideration. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hunter. Anything else from council, Mr. Nunley?
Thank you, Your Honor. Well, thank you for having me back. It feels like such a long time since Carrie and I were here, but all jesting aside, I went before the county commissioners when this came up for their vote back at the end of last year, and made the same comment I'm going to make right now. I do not feel that our elections department had any decrease in integrity in any way. They did a great job through this whole process. I felt that they held integrity high. So as we move into an election process, I hope people do not lose faith in our elections department through this. They all did a pretty upstanding job once it came to light, I thought, in my personal opinion anyway. Lastly, I just want to say one thing. Thank you, Chief Venezio. Came to a group that I attended lunch Friday. He did an amazing job and picked up all the same points that you hit on perfectly. So thank you, Chief, for coming down and doing that presentation. I heard a lot of great feedback after that presentation. So I think kudos to you, but also kudos to Chief Pierce and Doug and Amy. You have all done a good job presenting this emergency levy, I think, in a good light. So thank you.
Yeah, I'd be remiss, and thank you. I'd be remiss. We have a committee of about 10 to 12. We meet every week. That committee put the presentation together, hit the messaging points, have had input on all of the education going out. So I just want to acknowledge that entire committee's work involved with it. Amy's been instrumental in so many aspects of it that one, we definitely appreciate it. We get to be the faces of a lot of it. Sometimes that's good, sometimes that's bad, depending on the crowd we're in. But the committee that has been working on this has done a great job. But I really appreciate the comments.
Oh, please pass that on to the committee too.
Nothing,
Nothing?
nothing.
Ms. Dahlman?
I just wanted to say that I would also be in support of a letter about the CFAC. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Dahlman. Yeah, speaking of that, it's kind of fun to hear the comments. The commissioners even did this, like incredulous. I agree. I think a letter on this, I think that makes sense. Let's take a pause. I plan on talking with senators and representatives next week when we're in DC. This is one of the things that I want to ask them about and see what they can do, because it's a critical issue. It is upriver from us. And I think it's important to show some support to a local community, our neighboring city, Columbia Falls, with a letter. So, along those lines, what the county commissioner did, Mr. Russell, is it something we bring for council action? Or is that something we have a preponderance of evidence or agreement, we could draft something like that I could sign?
Yeah, I think it sounds like, unless there's an objection, we can probably just get a copy of the county's letter, look at it, revise it accordingly, and just have.
Joe Biden knows all about plagiarism, so we can do it.
So if that works.
Hey, go back to the 80s. He ran for president.
Sometimes it just stops me in mid-sentence. So if that works for council, we can redraft, take a look at the county's letter, any other examples, and then just have mayor sign off on it and submit to the accordingly population. Getting a lot of heads nodding, so we'll go ahead and go on that process.
Okay. All right, perfect. Other thing then, also, I think maybe, not necessarily at the next council meeting, but maybe the next work session, I wouldn't mind getting an update on Maine versus Montana, amicus brief, what that would look like, and just have a general public discussion on that at a work session, because it is an important issue, and really it does, to me, it's not necessarily about the legislation itself, it's the usurpation of power decision-making from the local level being pulled up. And I want to participate in that. I've been wrestling with how to do it. And I think at a work session, a conversation, we can talk about all the points. As we say, there's good things, there's bad things. But I think public participation is one of those things that we have to stand on as a local government in Montana. Other thing, an interesting story, Saturday, I think it was Saturday, I went out to shovel the snow. It was slick out. Had this gentleman walk up to my front door to ask me about the levy. This is one of our firemen. And he starts talking to me about the pitch, and I look at him and go, "Do you recognize me?" And he goes, "Well, you look familiar." And I go, "Well, I'm the mayor." And he goes, "Oh, well, I kind of wondered, because I have it in my deal that Brinley Johnson, my daughter, lives here." And I go, "Oh, don't worry, I'll talk to her too." So that was kind of funny that my house is now my daughter's house, and my firemen don't necessarily recognize me. Maybe that's a good thing. So anyways, that was kind of interesting. But I find it interesting as we look at this levy. It's a big ask for the public, but we have to do something. I find it interesting. Today, Tim Klusner called me and says, "Oh my God, Aaron Flint's just ridiculing you guys up and down because of the levy." And I said, Tim, I find it interesting. These are the same people that say, approve, 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 more housing, more housing, more housing, yet don't understand the costs associated with that. And when you try to pay for that, they ridicule you. There's no pleasing them. So I just find it interesting. I support the levy. I voted for it. I'm voting for it. And I want to move forward I want to see what the public says. This is the greatest opportunity for the public to tell us, what do you want for level of service? This is truly where we hear the voice of the public. God forbid the state legislature take that out of their hands. Because if they went this far with land planning, this is next. And pretty soon, we'll just be sitting up here to look good for the cameras and talk amongst ourselves. The last item I have is kind of a sad item. As we all know, a man who was elected as commissioner, Brad Abel, was elected, didn't even know who he was. Over time, I've gotten to know Brad. I consider Brad to be a dear friend. There's a person I can call at the county, ask about what's going on. I can call him and say, "Brad, dumb vote. What were you thinking?" And he'll listen. Unfortunately, Brad lost his wife, Alita, on Friday to cancer. So I just ask the public to keep our commissioner thoughts and prayers. If you see him, give him a hug. Tell him I'm thinking about you. It's times like this as a community. I don't understand that cancer touches everybody. I know it's touched me in my past, my family. I feel horrible for Brad. And I just want the public to keep him in the thoughts and prayers. So if you see him, please give him your condolences. Ask him, hey, let's go get a cup of coffee. He's going to need the assistance. And that said, for Brad, it goes for anybody else in this community. When somebody loses a spouse or a loved one, especially this early in life, it's tough to recover sometimes. So please pay attention. This is part of community coming together. So I ask that you do that. And with that, I adjourn.